Joel Larsson with Red Aggro, Matt Sperling with Abzan Control. Let's get to the floor and play the first semi-final of Pro Tour Magic Origins. Hello everyone and welcome to the semi-finals of Pro Tour Magic Origins. Rich Hagan in the booth alongside Pro Tour historian Brian David Marshall and Hall of Famer Louis Scott Vargas as we get ready to watch these two players do battle. Joel Larsson of Sweden. Back again, he was in the final of Pro Tour Gatecrash 2013 in Montreal. He loves Pro Tours in Canada. Or will our finalist be this man from channelfireball.com, Team Ultra Pro, Matt Sperling in his second Pro Tour Top 8. And Sperling is underway, already into scry mode. Brian David Marshall, what are we about to see?
Well, we're going to see a matchup between Abzan, one of the most dominant decks on the Pro Tour over the last, well, really since Siege Rhino's been printed. And we're going to see Red Aggro in the hands of Joel Larsson. This is a deck that goes back, you know, to Dave Price and the boat on the Pro Tour. It goes all the way back into the mid-90s.
Louis Scott Vargas, how do you see things panning out in what could be already a very quick start to Game 1?
Well, as they just said on the news desk, Game 1 is pretty good for Mono Red and particularly bad for Abzan. Like, Sperling is casting cards like Thoughtseize.
Shock myself.
With 2 creatures in play already. It does get better post-board, but I expect this to be a close match either way.
So Sperling doing all the good things that a pro should do, write down the cards in hand of Larsson, because he doesn't have the benefit of the top right of our screen as we do at home. We know how much you appreciate being able to see all the cards all the time. In we go.
Lightning Berserker gets in for 3, Monastery Swiftspear for 1, and Fire Drinker Satyr for 2. That's a dash on the Lightning Berserker, of course.
So the Berserker may well be back, as Sperling, who had quite a few mana issues in his quarterfinal, we thought it was actually going to do for him in the third game against Pat Cox, but he managed to pull it out, and now here he is with Courser of Crufix, the 2/4. Most of you will have seen plenty of this in Standard. There's another one on top of the deck as he hands back to Larsson.
Courser is a big part of what you're trying to do against the red decks. You know, the 2/4 body's not irrelevant, and the life gain, of course, is very welcome. But, you know, Joel at this point is willing to trade multiple cards just to get it off the table.
Yep, 2 for 1 in advantage to Sperling, but it's the life total that is mattering right now for Sperling, and it's not very much. There he is, 20-1 behind. Don't worry about the 20 for Larsson, just worry about the 1 for Sperling. Here's Courser of Crufix, what's on top, there you see it. And there is Game 1. I reckon that was about 2.5 minutes.
If that at all, I mean, you know, maybe with shuffling.
Yeah, I was going to say, 1.5 minutes of that was shuffling.
All right, so we will be right back with Games 2 and maybe 3 after this.
With the newest. Outfit your Magic collection with the newest Magic Origins accessories from Ultra Pro. You can see the full array of card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and portfolios showing off your favorite Magic artwork at ultrapro.com. Start on your road to the Pro Tour by playing in a preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. With more than 2,000 locations running events, you're sure to find one near you. Visit magic.wizards.com/pptq for schedules and information.
Welcome to our first semi-final. Oh, wait, that was 3 minutes ago. Welcome to Game 2 of our first semi-final between Joel Larsson and Matt Sperling. Joel Larsson, the red aggro player, is 1 to the good. But now things get to change around a little because it turns out, as Matt Sperling said in his quarterfinal matchup, Thoughtseizing doesn't feel great against Mono Red. So why don't we take a look at the sideboards. We'll begin with the Swede, Joel Larsson, who is 1 up, remember, with his red aggro deck. Let's take a look at his sideboard together with Louis Scott Vargas and Brian David Marshall. We have a couple of Chandra Pyromasters for Joel Larsson. There you see them. 4, full 4 of Eidolon of the Great Revel. A really fun and interesting card in Satyr Fire Dancer. Couple of Arc Lightning and the full suite of your Sunday Roast. So that's what's going on, but how many of those, Louise, will he be looking at?
Roast is by far the most important. It gives the red decks a way to interact with Siege Rhino, which they actually were lacking before Roast got printed. But 2 mana for 5 damage, we saw Pat Cox bring those in the exact same matchup in the quarterfinals. The other cards I don't like as much. Chandra Pyromaster seems like it could have some utility. It knocks a blocker out of the way,
Yeah,
essentially.
if the game's going to go a little longer, maybe.
But Roast is really what you're looking at. So that's the card I would expect Joel to be leaning on. I do like Chandra if your opponent's boarding in a bunch of Drown in Sorrows and Farika's Cures and ways to kill your small creatures. It's a way to kind of go over the top of that plan. But it depends on how many cards Joel really does not want in his deck.
All right.
Yeah,
So
Matt Sperling's doing a lot of sideboarding.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think of Matt Sperling as especially talkative, but when you did your quarterfinal interview with him about the sideboard, I was watching, and then I sat down, and then I watched some more, and then we got to chapter 2, and boy, oh boy, I mean, he has got some work to do. Why don't we take a look at Sperling's sideboard? And BDM, you can take us through what some of his options are. Matt Sperling sits with 3 Fleece Mane Lion, 1 Tasiga the Golden Fang, couple of Dromaker's Command, 2 Drown in Sorrow, which Luis has already mentioned, a Duress.
Okay, so all of those are coming in.
Right, okay, so
that
all
whole
9
top
of the
row.
top row, right? And then on the bottom, the slightly less loved row, 1 End Hostilities, 1 Farika's Cure, double Read the Bones, Ultimate Price, and a singleton Utter End.
And he could be bringing in 3 cards from the bottom row. He'll definitely be bringing in the Freaker's Cure and the Ultimate Price. Said he, may or may not bring in the Utter End in these situations, which is 11 or 12 cards. How do you make room for that, Luis?
Well, you take out a lot of cards like Thoughtseize or even some combination of Ugin and Elspeth, like the late game cards. You don't need the disruption like Thoughtseize because you'd rather have the creature-based disruption like Fleece Mane Lion or Drown's a way to kill the opponent's creatures. And you certainly don't need the late game. If you get to the late game, that's already like more than half the battle.
How sweet is Dromoka's Command in this matchup?
Dromoka's Command is very powerful. The fact that it counters a burn spell and kills a creature is just, that's going to be the most common mode, but it can do a lot.
It is noticeable. I look at this and just seeing 26 lands in Sperling's deck. If you're bringing in 12, I mean, that is more than a third of the spells that are changing over. We talk about sideboarding as this sort of very subtle art, but if 24 cards are changing, that's playing a different matchup.
Well, part of the strength of Abzan is it gets to play these sideboard cards. Like, look at cards like Duress or Tasiga or Fleece Mane Lion. Those can come in against control decks. Those can come in against plenty of other decks. And that just lets the Abzan deck change its composition against whatever it's fighting against. It's very flexible in that way. And that's why it kind of gets away with having a slightly poor game 1 against some of the bigger matchups.
Yeah, I often refer to the archetype broadly as adjective Abzan because it can be control, it can be aggro, and you see it in the sideboard that a lot of the cards that are in the sideboard are cards that sometimes you'll see in main deck builds of Abzan, depending on the metagame. I was talking to a bunch of different people about what deck they would play next week at Friday Night Magic, and a lot of people are like, well, now that we have a read on the field, right, I would play Abzan with this, and this, sort of making their adjustments to Abzan based on, knowing they need to beat blue-red artifacts or knowing they need to beat mono-red, which maybe they didn't fully know, 5 days ago.
Yeah, control decks like Abzan get the most out of a known metagame because they can really tailor themselves, and having access to 3 colors, particularly black and white, tend to have the best sideboard cards in general. Just, in the history of Magic, that has, I think, been very consistent, especially black. Black, I think, overall, because it has the discard element, and then cards like Farika's Cure, like having both those sides of the equation. When you're playing an Abzan deck, you get to really beat almost everything you want to beat. You can build an Abzan deck that can beat just about anything.
I was talking to you off air this morning, Luis, about whether the red decks were a deck for 2:30 on a Sunday afternoon and whether they would still be a deck for 2:30 on a Monday morning, or whether it is a case of, yep, it was good for this weekend, now everyone knows how to beat it. But I was sort of imagining a world where some of the opponents were bringing in 2, 3, maybe 4 cards, but when in a deck like this, Sperling is bringing in 12, well, maybe there's not a lot of room to do even more to beat the red, and the red is still doing very nicely, because Joel Larsson, who's smiling away there, is 1 up in this best of 3, and we are ready for game number 2. So why don't we get down to the floor and see what Matt Sperling can do about the red menace here. You see Larsson's opening hand. He's got 2 mountains, Lightning Berserker, Monastery Swift Spear, Lightning Strike, Roast, and Stoke the Flames. The Monastery Swift Spear is already into action sideways and dealing damage.
And you notice that Sperling played Temple of Silence and didn't scry? I think it's because he already scried off the new mulligan rule and knew that he wanted to keep the Windswept Heath on top.
So second land for Sperling.
And there you see the Courser of Krufix waiting for turn 3 here for Sperling. But that's as fine a target for Roast as Siege Rhino, I assume.
And this isn't the optimal start for Joel. He's debating whether to cast Lightning Strike for an additional point of damage off the Prowess trigger, but turn 2 Lightning Striking your opponent to the face is much less appealing than just dashing a creature or even just casting one.
So
it looks like he has a Lightning Berserker. Why would he not want to go Lightning Berserker, get in for 2 with dash?
I'm surprised. Maybe he didn't want it to get ultimate priced, but I think you'd be okay with that trade. Like, he didn't end up using his mana super efficiently there. Maybe he just wanted to cast it.
And he did, and that's what he's done post combat. Cast a non-dashed Lightning Berserker.
And if I'm Sperling, that kind of signifies to me that Joel doesn't have maybe a ton of lands in hand, because otherwise, he wouldn't be too afraid of the extra mana commitment every turn.
So Sperling will go here is my Courser of Krufix.
Well, this is where Roast is going to start to shine. Just being able to roast the Courser, hit for 2 with Lightning Berserker, roast the Siege Rhino. This is a way for the red deck to just keep getting damage through.
With 2 roasts in hand. Just
Now,
take a note on the
Right, because I wanted to
Hand
ask you
viewer.
both about that. If you've got 2 roasts, that's fine. I can see that you go kill the Courser, kill the Siege Rhino. If you only have 1 roast, are you obliged to deal with the Courser pretty much, and then find yourself up against a Siege Rhino, or is roast a card with 1 copy where you're patient for the Rhino?
It really just depends on context. Like in this case, if that the second roast wasn't in Joel's hand, I think he would stoke the Courser.
Right.
But because he has 2 roasts, he's happy to do this.
Roast, away it goes.
right. Monastery Swift Spear comes down, gets a Prowess trigger.
Yeah, and drawing Swift Spear was very, very good because it's a 2-power hasted creature for 1 mana in that situation. You already wanted to roast there, so that was a very, very good draw.
But Siege Rhino has come down, one of the great granddaddies of recent standard, but it gets roasted once again.
And then a 4-power attack for Joel Larsson. More than undoes the damage done by that first Siege Rhino.
And this is the situation you want to put Sperling in if you're Joel, where every turn Sperling's tapping out for something, you're answering it but getting in with your creatures. And so once you fall into that rhythm, it gets pretty hard to get out of it, because the Abzan deck doesn't usually get to play 2 spells in the same turn. And the way Sperling did it here is by playing a Den Protector face up, which is really not what you want to be doing with the card.
And we are going to see the Fleecemane Lion fall to Lightning Strike. Dash in another Lightning Berserker.
And you can't block the Swift Spear here, so you can trade for the non-dashed Lightning Berserker, presumably, unless you are worried about... if you draw Drown, I guess it's better, but...
Just 2 cards left for Larsson.
We know they're good ones.
Yeah, Sperling has decided whether he wants Lightning Berserker in play or in Joel's hand. He's got the option for either.
And he decides to clog up his hand with more spells.
So back we go to Larsson, 17-10 ahead, more importantly 1-0 ahead, which means that right now Larsson has in his hands the means to reach the final.
No block.
In pump, pump,
yeah.
pump, Sperling in desperate trouble, 1-0 down.
Didn't have the second black for the hero's downfall there.
I'll play Courser. Yeah. I'll play Windswept Heath, Gain a Life.
Windswept Heath gain a life.
I'm gonna break even on life. Sure.
And go back, break even on life, he says.
I think that Courser was a turn too late. The double stoke in Joel's hand means that Matt's got 1 turn to draw Siege Rhino to get up to 9 instead of 8 here.
And we'll see what's on top of his deck.
Excuse me.
Joel untaps, draws a mountain, and will reach out to to stoke the courser of Crewfix.
So this play doesn't force Matt to have a Siege Rhino, but it plays a lot better if Matt doesn't have a removal spell.
Which, of course, he does.
4.
And he Hero's Downfall is the Lightning Berserker. Joel Larsson shows him the second Stoke the Flames, and Matt Sperling extends the hand. Joel Larsson is through to the finals here.
That was a quick match.
That is the second Pro Tour final in Canada for Joel Larsson. It will not be Tom Martell in the way, that is for sure. It will either be Australia's Paul Jackson, or it will be Mike Sigris, Blue-Red's Insol Artifact. Luis, we talked about the fact that you've sat in the feature match area playing matches you know you can't win, or you know you're in deep trouble for, along with your many great successes. What is it like? It must be not scary exactly, but when you face the mono red, if you choose not to play mono red at an event like this, well, it's all fine when
Which
you're
I
playing
consistently
60.
do, by the way.
Yeah, indeed. You have to be aware, you have to look yourself in the eye and say, I know that there are games where I don't get to play Magic because I cede to my opponent the ability to go, nut draw, you're dead.
Yeah, you sign up for that every time you play in a Magic tournament, no matter what deck you're playing. Just sometimes your opponent just attacks you with an Ensouled Ornithopter on turn 2, or sometimes your opponent plays 3 1-drops in a row and you're on the draw. And yeah, I mean, those games are tough, but that for every game that happens, presumably there's multiple games where it doesn't.
Right, which is why Matt Sperling gets to be sitting here in the semi-finals, having had a tremendous run, and BDM, congratulations to him. To me, one of the biggest moments of the weekend, actually, was when you talked to him yesterday, just in and around his top 8 certainty, and he said some very interesting things about teams, and it feels to me like we may be on the brink of a kind of new generation of team approach to Magic that maybe began with Team CFB.
Well, certainly. I mean, the CFB, kind of like, boot camp has been, replaced by a remote desktop approach, right? We're gonna work from home, and Team Ultra Pro has been, as dominant in many ways as Channel Fireball was when you guys really kind of, broke through as a team in the 2007, 2008's time of Magic. These guys are putting multiple players in now for the last 3 Pro Tours into the top 8. It's very impressive.
Some phenomenal players.
Of course, a lot of players who used to be on Channel Fireball.
Yes, there's some overlap there, but I think their approach is really good. They have been meeting a little earlier than they initially planned some of the time. You get enough people together, and there will be some Magic players who are like, no, I want to meet on Monday. But a lot of the online communication and testing they're doing is very clearly paying dividends.
Of course, it does help if you are a very, very good player, and only very, very good players get into the Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame. So, yesterday, and on Friday, we were able to announce the new members of the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour Hall of Fame. As the historian, Brian David Marshall was part of that. So for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it, we're going to show you now that announcement for the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour Hall of Fame 2015.